Everything's falling apart. Dirty money, broken deals, and family drama exploding at the worst possible time. Alliances shift, secrets surface, and every move feels like it could be the last. Get ready because it's about to get wild. Season 1, Marty, a financial advisor in Chicago, talks about money's power while secretly hiding stacks of cash inside coolers. After finishing a meeting with a couple, he receives a strange email from Bob Lilly with a video of a man and woman together. His business partner Bruce joins in, convincing the couple to sign a deal. Later, Bruce's fiancée Liz shows them a new office space. When she leaves, Bruce teases Marty for living a quiet life and pushes him to invest in Missouri's Lake of the Ozarks. At home, Marty has dinner with his wife Wendy and their kids, Charlotte and Jonah. Family tensions rise, and afterward, Marty secretly replays the video, revealing Wendy as the woman in it. Distraught, he imagines being with someone else before Bruce calls him to meet at a trucking warehouse. There, they're confronted by Dell, a dangerous cartel lieutenant. He demands millions stolen from him. Suspicious, Marty calls his questioning a trick, but Dell proves otherwise by killing Liz. Under pressure, Bruce admits he and another partner stole $8 million. Dell executes them all, sparing only Marty, who pitches laundering money in the Ozarks to save himself. Marty confesses everything to Wendy, who urges him to run, but he insists the cartel will find them. As they prepare to move, Marty learns Wendy's affair partner is lawyer Gary Silverberg. Before long, Dell kills Gary, sparing Wendy after Marty proves his wit once more. With their accounts drained, Marty barely pays off the cartel. Dell orders him to clean the stolen money by summer. Meanwhile, FBI agents close in, setting up surveillance. Forced to abandon their life, Marty and Wendy pack up the kids and head for Missouri. On the road, Marty breaks down, realizing the cost of his choices. The Byrdes settle into a motel, with Marty hiding $8 million in suitcases and asking Jonah and Charlotte to guard the room. Charlotte keeps pressing for answers, but he avoids the question. On the road, Marty and Wendy argue over laundering strategies, with her blaming him for Gary's death. Tensions rise, and she storms off after striking him. Wendy turns to local realtor Sam Dermody to look for houses, while Charlotte diverts a hotel worker from discovering the cash. Marty spends days pitching investment deals, but finds no takers. Meanwhile, Charlotte befriends Wyatt Langmore and his brother 3, who lure her onto their father's stolen boat. Marty approaches strip club owner Bobby Dean, but Bobby easily spots his laundering attempt and rejects him. Wendy views lakefront houses with Sam and meets Buddy Deeker, an older man with heart problems who insists on living in the property until his death. She's unsettled, but considers the offer. Jonah, bored, wanders off and meets Tuck, a kind young man with Down syndrome who gifts him a pocket knife. Meanwhile, the police chase Wyatt and 3's stolen boat, leaving Charlotte shaken. When the Byrdes collect her, Sheriff Nix reveals the Langmores' criminal ties, including their cousin Ruth, the motel worker Charlotte had turned away. Marty later discovers some cash missing. Tracking it, he confronts the Langmores, warning them that stealing from the cartel means death. Despite Ruth's push to kill him, he convinces them the risk isn't worth it, though Russ and Boyd keep a portion. Marty hides the rest in a boat at his storage unit. Elsewhere, FBI agent Roy Petty arrives in Missouri after discovering evidence from cartel murders. While Marty despairs and briefly considers suicide, Jonah suggests the struggling Blue Cat Lodge as a business opportunity. Marty seizes on it, beginning his next risky move. The Byrdes move into a lake house, where Marty argues with movers who leave furniture on the lawn while Buddy, ill, wanders to the water. Jonah and Charlotte watch as Marty tells them to carry things inside. Meanwhile, Agent Petty takes photos from a distance. Ruth hides the Langmores' $20,000, scolding Uncles Boyd and Russ for wasting it and ordering silence. Marty, now an investor in the Blue Cat Lodge, discusses plans with owner Rachel. Petty watches undercover. Ruth asks Marty for work after losing her motel job and convinces him she can help. He records her depositing cash, tying her to him. Wendy grows paranoid after a car follows her, and a boating death is reported. Charlotte punches Wyatt for luring her onto a stolen boat. Jonah befriends Tuck, a kind young man with Down syndrome. Jonah later watches violent cartel footage while Wendy and Marty argue about the move's cost to the kids. At the lodge, Marty defends Tuck from a rude patron and is hit. Ruth and Wyatt sit on a trailer roof as Boyd and Russ fight below. Wyatt says he wants out. Marty is haunted by an SPCA commercial that seems to accuse him. He ignores Buddy's worsening cough in the basement. Agent Evans confronts Marty, citing a call tied to Bruce's disappearance and offering witness protection. Marty refuses and says he planned to dissolve the company. Sheriff Nix watches. Wendy chases a vulture off the lawn, then confronts the Langmore boys after finding another dead animal and throws it back, warning them to stay away. Marty sneaks to Bobby Dean's club for information while Petty works undercover. Ruth returns to find her uncles bought 2 bobcats. Furious, she locks them in and vows to learn Marty's trade so she can betray him. Marty sets his sights on taking over Lickety Splits, a failing strip club, knowing it could be the perfect front for laundering money. At home, Jonah discovers a dead coyote and cuts it open, worrying his parents. They discuss his behavior on the boat, fearing it might escalate, but Charlotte overhears. When they finally sit Jonah down, he explains he didn't kill the animal. He was only studying it because of his fascination with vultures. Relieved, they drop the issue. Meanwhile, Agent Roy Petty keeps watching Marty at the Blue Cat and takes an interest in Russ Langmore, Ruth's uncle. He invites him on a fishing trip and casually reveals he's gay. Russ reacts coldly, putting distance between them. Marty sends Ruth to crack the strip club's safe. Pretending to apply for a job, Ruth tricks Bobby Dean, the owner, but when the chance comes, she violently escapes instead. She then asks Marty for $2,000, refusing to explain. With the money, she hires locals to spend big at the club and calls in a fake shooting. Police raid the place and arrest Bobby for multiple crimes. Ruth admits she couldn't open the safe, so Marty uses his minivan and a chain to rip it out. Inside, he finds the club deed with no owner listed. Marty visits Bobby in jail, offering to buy the place. At first, Bobby refuses, but Marty reveals he knows about Bobby's Panama laundering and already has the deed. With pressure, Bobby accepts a lower deal. Soon after, Bobby goes to the Snells, the dangerous couple behind the club's money. They kill him to protect their secret. Back home, Charlotte demands honesty from her parents. Jonah catches Marty cleaning cash, and instead of hiding it, Marty teaches him exactly how laundering works. In a flashback, a young man robs a store and shoots Mason Young when the pastor offers himself in place of others. Mason survives and, in the present, is seen swimming before returning home to his pregnant wife, Grace. Out on the lake, Wendy spots a bloated body at their dock. Marty recognizes it as Bobby Dean. Though they consider staying quiet, boaters witness them, forcing a police report. Sheriff Nix grows suspicious since Marty recently bought Bobby's club. Soon after, Jacob Snell confronts Marty, revealing Bobby was his partner and pressuring him to work together. Marty refuses, knowing the cartel wouldn't allow it. The Snells send Ash to spy on the Byrdes. Meanwhile, Charlotte takes a job at the Blue Cat and bonds with the Langmores, while Buddy teaches Jonah how to shoot. At the club, Ruth tells Marty that everyone thinks he killed Bobby. He denies it, but hires her to manage the place. She turns it profitable, hiring new dancers and laying down rules, even fighting a worker who insulted her father. Wendy faces Gary Silverberg's son, Josh, who demands the truth about his dad's death. She lies that Gary killed himself after she ended things, but Josh doesn't believe her. Marty later shows Nick's paperwork proving he owns the club. With no clear motive, Bobby's death is ruled a heroin overdose. The Byrdes then pitch Mason on building a land-based church, planning to launder through it. This clashes with the Snells, whose heroin shipments hide inside Bibles at Mason's floating sermons. Meanwhile, Roy Petty grows closer to Russ Langmore. After a tense fishing trip, Russ assaults him, but later returns drunk, leading to an affair. As fireworks explode, Ash breaks into the Byrdes' home to snoop, unaware Jonah is nearby with a stolen rifle, nearly leading to violence. While checking on church construction, Marty is kidnapped by the Snells. They reveal their heroin business, smuggling drugs through Bibles at Mason's lake sermons where police have little presence. They warn Marty to halt the new church, hinting at danger for Mason's pregnant wife Grace if he doesn't convince him to stay on the water. Wendy pursues money through real estate with Sam. After boosting his sales, she asks for a bonus. Though his mother Eugenia refuses, Sam sides with Wendy and rewards her efforts. Ruth visits her father Cade in prison, who orders her to kill Marty and steal his money. She rigs a trap on the dock by electrifying the ladder, testing it successfully on a mouse. Later, she lures Marty toward it, but nothing happens. Roy had already disabled the setup and secretly watched. Jonah spots him and points a gun, but lets him leave. Furious, Ruth blames Russ for ruining her plan. When he denies it, she mocks him until he snaps and punches her. Elsewhere, Wendy bonds with Buddy over drinks. He shares his past with the Teamsters Union during the Jimmy Hoffa era. Later, Wendy discovers a disturbing gift from cartel boss Belle, a jar containing human eyes. Marty and Wendy take it as a threat and push harder to finish laundering $8 million. Their temporary success brings them closer again, but tension returns when Wendy finds incriminating files on his computer. Charlotte skips Wyatt's local party to spend time with Zach, a tourist from Chicago. She sleeps with him, but is crushed when he leaves without goodbye. Wyatt comforts her, reminding her that tourists never stay. At the Blue Cat, Rachel notices financial irregularities. Marty admits he took money to keep up with laundering demands. She threatens to call the police, and in anger, he sweeps her desk. Meanwhile, the Snells learn construction hasn't stopped. Driving home, Marty sees the church rising with a large cross already in place. Mason keeps pushing forward with his church construction, ignoring the Snells' warnings. To keep Mason safe, Marty gives the Snells $700,000 of cartel money he hasn't cleaned yet. He also tells Mason the truth, that the Snells are drug dealers and want him back on the water for their smuggling. The Snells strike back, claiming Marty is only building the church to launder cash. Realizing Marty lied about charity and delays, Mason burns the church structure to the ground. Meanwhile, Charlotte and Jonah start their new school year. Charlotte struggles with the family's situation and skips class, hopping a bus to Chicago. Wendy and Ruth track her down in St. Louis and bring her back home. Roy keeps working on Russ, convincing him to focus on a bait and tackle shop instead of crime. He suggests asking Marty to invest, while also pushing Russ to promise he won't go after Marty again. At the same time, Cade grows impatient in prison. He warns Ruth not to visit again unless Marty is already dead, pressuring her into choosing between loyalty and survival. Back at home, Charlotte continues battling her unhappiness. unhappiness. One night, she takes a swim, ignoring her father's warning to stay close to shore. She drifts further and further out, nearly surrendering to the water. But when her feet finally touch the lake bed, she realizes the water isn't as deep as it seemed. With relief and sudden joy, she laughs and makes her way back to shore. The heavy weight of her depression suddenly lifted. Back in 2007, Wendy and Marty are shown driving when she shares the news that she's pregnant again. Their joy is cut short when they get into a car accident that tragically causes a miscarriage. The loss leaves Wendy in a long stretch of depression. After having their children, she tries to return to the workforce but struggles to land a job. Before stepping away, she built a career in public relations, running campaigns for politicians like Bobby Rush and even Barack Obama during his Illinois Senate run. Years later, Dell approaches Marty and his business partner Bruce with a deal to clean cartel money. At first, they decline after looking over the ledgers, but eventually they agree to reconsider. Marty expects Wendy to push back on such a dangerous idea, but she surprisingly supports it. This tips the scale, and Marty and Bruce accept the job. Not long after, Dell turns his attention to Lewis, his former financial advisor. Marty uncovered Louis' betrayal, exposing that he skimmed money and worked with the FBI. Dell wastes no time confronting him. His men restrain Louis, kill him in brutal fashion, and remove his eyes, leaving them behind as a chilling message in a glass. Meanwhile, Roy is introduced in a different light. He has a steady boyfriend and is starting out in his FBI career. But his home life is weighed down by a strained relationship with his mother, who is addicted to heroin. At work, Roy grows increasingly frustrated with the Bureau's focus on terrorism cases, while drug operations are sidelined. Determined to push his own agenda, he begins plotting ways to steer the focus toward the drug trade, setting up the path that will eventually collide with Marty's world. Buddy shows Jonah how to handle a gun, and soon Jonah realizes someone from the cartel is tailing the family. Wanting protection, he has Tuck secretly buy him a rifle. Meanwhile, Marty and Wendy convince Sam's controlling mother, Eugenia, to put her savings into Marty's so-called investment fund. Her $900,000 replaces the cash Marty handed over to the Snells, and with that boost, he successfully launders the cartel's $8 million right on schedule. Pleased, the cartel immediately ups the stakes by delivering a staggering $50 million, the first portion of the $500 million Marty promised to wash. Things take a turn when Eugenia dies in an accident. Sam scrambles to cover her extravagant funeral costs, but Marty convinces him to let them pay so he doesn't risk penalties from pulling money out of the fund. At the funeral home, Wendy sees just how outrageous the bill is, over $50,000. The funeral director refuses to cut prices, but Wendy notices his finances are shaky. She flips the situation and walks away with ownership of the funeral home, turning another obstacle into an opportunity. On the other side, Roy's web of manipulation tightens. He reveals to Russ that their relationship was nothing but a setup. With recordings of Russ admitting he plotted against Marty, Roy pushes him to become an informant against Ruth, with the eventual goal of turning Ruth on Marty. Instead, Russ and his brother Boyd plan to kill Marty themselves and run off with the money. Ruth senses danger and, fearing she'll take the fall, acts first. She rigs the Blue Cat Lodge dock with electricity, killing both Russ and Boyd. Marty and Rachel discover the aftermath when the power cuts out. They recover weapons and cash, then call the police, who rule the deaths as an accident. The Byrdes try to support Wyatt and his younger brother 3 after the loss of Russ and Boyd, but Wyatt quietly suspects Marty had a hand in their deaths. Meanwhile, Mason struggles with his faith and refuses to preach on the water. When he comes home, he finds Grace missing but discovers a newborn in her place. Horrified, he believes the Snells cut the baby from her body. The sheriff questions the Snells, but with no body or crime scene, he can't act. Before leaving, he mentions crossing paths with Marty, asking what business they had with him. The Snells reply that Marty owes them a debt more than the sheriff's life. Marty decides his family must leave for safety, but Garcia, a cartel enforcer, stops them. Jonah sneaks off to retrieve his rifle and tries to shoot Garcia, but the gun doesn't fire because Buddy secretly removed the bullets. Buddy then steps in, holding Garcia at gunpoint so Wendy and the kids can escape. A shotgun blast shatters the house window during the chaos. When Marty returns, he finds Garcia dead and Buddy barely holding on with his oxygen. They take Garcia's body to the funeral home, but Marty fumbles with the cremation oven, resorting to YouTube videos for guidance. Elsewhere, Rachel stumbles on part of the cartel's $50 million stash and secretly takes some. When she comes back to the Blue Cat, Dell is waiting, asking about Marty's whereabouts. She denies knowing, and Dell leaves, watched by a grieving Roy nearby. Dell later tortures Marty, demanding Garcia's location. Marty refuses, but reveals the Snells' heroin business and pitches an ambitious plan: partner the cartel with the Snells, build a casino on flooded land, and launder money through it. Everyone agrees, until Dell insults the Snells as rednecks. Darlene demands he repeat it, and when he does, she blasts him with a shotgun. Meanwhile, Wendy and the kids abandon their escape and decide to return, choosing to face the dangers with Marty instead of running without him. Season 2, Darlene and Ash get rid of Dell's body by dissolving it with chemicals and burying the remains on the Snell farm. To cover their tracks, Marty and and Jacob send Ash to Chicago in Delle's car with his credit cards, creating a trail to make it seem like Delle was never in the Ozarks. With Delle gone, Marty and the Snells meet Helen Pierce, the Navarro cartel's sharp attorney, to move forward with the casino project. Marty then approaches State Senator Brock Mercer, hoping to push new legislation that would legalize casino construction. Mercer is hesitant and cryptically advises him to visit the Lake House. Curious, Marty and Wendy discover that the Lake House belongs to Charles Wilkes, a wealthy businessman and major political donor. They quickly realize that his influence is essential to their plan and try to win him over to support the legislation. Back on the cartel side, Helen confronts the Byrdes with proof of Ash using Delle's credit card in Chicago. She makes it clear she knows what happened to both Delle and Garcia, but offers them a lifeline. The cartel will overlook it if the Snells pay reparations. She doesn't specify what form those reparations should take. Darlene flatly refuses to give up money, clinging to pride and control. Jacob, however, understands that a sacrifice must be made to keep the cartel satisfied. In a grim move, he decides Ash himself will be the payment. Jacob kills him, both to save Darlene from being targeted and to appease Navarro's people. Marty and Wendy hide the disturbing truth from Charlotte and Jonah, but privately they acknowledge the outcome. With Ash gone, the cartel considers the debt settled, which means their ambitious casino project remains alive and moving forward. The Kansas City Mafia sends State Senator Mercer a clear threat, shaking his support for the casino bill. To keep things on track, Marty leans on Buddy's old ties with Frank Cosgrove, the Mafia boss. They reach an agreement that the casino will be union-run, which helps stabilize the project and calm political nerves. Meanwhile, Ruth's father, Cade, is released on parole. Even though Ruth convinced Marty to offer him a job, Cade refuses. Marty instead begins trusting Ruth with bigger responsibilities, even handing her the cash needed to buy and relocate the riverboat that will become the casino. When the seller tries to overcharge her, Ruth proves her toughness and negotiates like a pro. On the Snell farm, Darlene longs for something to care for after losing Ash. She asks Jacob if they can adopt a baby, looking for a way to fill the void. Elsewhere, Wendy spots Mason preaching on the streets of Jefferson City, holding baby Zeke. Back in the political arena, Wendy first tries charm at a prayer breakfast to sway hesitant senators. When that fails, she turns to blackmail. She hires Lulu, a stripper from Lickety Splits, to seduce Senator Foreman's husband. Wendy bursts into the hotel room mid-act, capturing photos and video of him in a compromising situation to secure leverage. At the same time, Charles Wilkes pushes Wendy for something personal in exchange for securing the final Senate vote. She rejects him, but when she tells Marty, he bluntly asks if she went through with it, which hurts her deeply. By the next morning, Wilkes has already pressured Senator Blake into skipping the vote, tipping the numbers in the casino's favor. Meanwhile, Cade proves he hasn't changed, robbing a diner and pressuring Ruth to find Marty's hidden money. Rachel's drug-fueled spiral ends with a car crash, giving Agent Roy the chance to force her into becoming an informant at the Blue Cat. The casino bill finally passes, but the victory is overshadowed when Senator Blake takes his own life. Soon after, all of the Byrde family's businesses are shut down by state inspectors, a move quietly pushed by Agent Roy. The family is left scrambling, unsure of who ordered the crackdown. Charles Wilkes makes his price for political help clear. He wants a large development tied to the casino, but Jacob and Darlene refuse to sell more land. To talk it over, the Snells invite Marty and Jonah hunting, where Jonah kills a deer. The Snells later torch Wilkes' boat, sending a strong warning for him to back off. Meanwhile, Wendy approaches Blake's widow, convincing her not to sue Wilkes by promising a charitable foundation in Blake's name. Rachel, struggling with addiction, tries digging up evidence against Marty, but Roy keeps her hooked with stolen drugs, making her easier to control. At the same time, Ruth causes trouble at the boat repair shop where Cade works, pushing the owner to sell. This move hands Marty another business he can use for laundering, strengthening his operation. Elsewhere, Charlotte spends more time with Wyatt, who's still wrestling with the loss of his uncles Russ and Boyd. Their connection grows as Wyatt keeps searching for answers. The Byrdes later attend dinner at the Snell farm to celebrate their uneasy partnership. The meal even includes venison from the deer Jonah killed during the hunting trip. But while the adults talk business, Jonah quietly takes matters into his own hands. Using half of the $10,000 Charlotte once stole while helping hide the cartel's $50 million, he opens a bank account under the alias Michael Fleming, the fake identity the family used when fleeing after Garcia's death. Roy keeps listening to secret recordings about Marty, including one where Russ once told Ruth to kill him. At the same time, he causes trouble at his motel and even robs a local dealer to fuel his obsession. Disguised as a customer at the Blue Cat, Roy pressures Rachel to keep pushing Marty for proof of laundering. Meanwhile, Wyatt and his brother 3 search for the bobcats Ruth freed earlier. Wyatt later imagines talking to his late father Russ, still haunted by his death. He tells Ruth he was rejected from Missouri University, leaving her furious. She storms into his school to plead with the counselor, but when her words are ignored, she slaps the woman in frustration. Wendy starts making more moves, offering Sam Dermody, now trying his hand at motivational speaking, a job managing the strip club. Later, she rushes Buddy to the hospital when his heart condition worsens, but he leaves against doctor's orders, refusing to die there. Marty struggles with the gaming commission when Mr. Beecher refuses to back the casino. Beecher hints at a shady deal, but Wendy senses a trap, and she's right since Roy is pulling the strings. Tensions rise when Charlotte and Wyatt smoke together, and she accidentally lets slip that she and her family were near the dock when Russ and Boyd died. This sparks Wyatt's suspicions, and he directly questions Marty, who brushes it off. Meanwhile, Rachel spirals further, upsetting Roy by calling another man Marty during a fling. When she later confronts Marty, she reveals Roy is actually FBI, earning herself a chilling threat from Roy to stay quiet. At home, Mason angrily rejects Marty's money. That night, Ruth accidentally lets slip that cartel cash is hidden at the Byrde house, leading to an FBI raid the next morning. The FBI digs deeper into the Byrdes, uncovering Charlotte's hidden share of the money she once took. Roy uses it during Marty's interrogation, trying to pressure him into flipping. He also brings up Ruth, revealing that she once wired the doc to kill him the same way she killed her uncles, making her look like an informant. Afterward, Helen tells Marty the Snells must burn their poppy fields before the FBI finds anything. At the farm, she delivers the order directly, but Darlene refuses. Instead, Darlene pushes Wendy to use her ties with Charles Wilkes to help her adopt a baby boy. Meanwhile, Charlotte plans to run away and asks Jonah for his half of the money to buy a van. Jonah firmly refuses, unwilling to join her. Back at the Byrde home, Roy makes himself comfortable, waiting for Marty and Wendy to return. He drops hints about what he knows, including Marty's affair, trying to rattle them. That night, Helen visits with a photo of Ruth meeting Roy, asking Marty if Ruth can be trusted. Marty hesitates, but ultimately defends her. He then rushes to warn Ruth, who admits she once tried to kill him, but swears things have changed. Their conversation is cut short when Helen's crew arrives. Cade briefly tries to resist, but quickly backs down. Marty continues vouching for Ruth, but she's dragged off and waterboarded. She refuses to break, impressing Helen, who begins to see Ruth's loyalty as genuine. At the same time, Wendy cleverly distracts Darlene with adoption paperwork. In reality, it's a setup for Buddy to sneak onto the Snell farm. Armed with their own equipment, he rigs the fertilizer sprayer with gasoline and sets the poppy fields ablaze, striking a major blow against the Snells. After the destruction of the poppy fields, Wendy and Buddy share a quiet drive home. She talks about the family's dream of moving to Australia once the casino is complete. As music from his younger years plays, Buddy drifts into memories of Detroit, expressing regret for never going back. Peacefully, he passes away in the car. The family organizes a grand funeral to honor him. Jonah reaches out to people from Buddy's past, filling the service with a surprisingly large crowd. Even Frank Cosgrove and his Kansas City crew show up to pay their respects. Meanwhile, Roy leads a full raid on the Snell farm. Jacob dismisses the burned poppies as a controlled burn, but Roy's excitement grows when his team uncovers buried bones. Mason reappears, hoping the remains might belong to Grace, and he even offers baby Zeke for DNA testing. To counter, Marty and the Snells secretly dig up the graves of old Snell relatives, swapping those remains with what the FBI found. When tests are run, the results are meaningless, and Jacob spins the story as authorities desecrating his family's history. Elsewhere, Roy questions Charles Wilkes, trying to pull him into the investigation. Wilkes offers information on Marty in exchange for Wendy's protection, but Wendy refuses to abandon her husband, keeping the family united under pressure. At the same time, Ruth starts shifting loyalties. Frustrated with her limited future under Marty's control, she chooses to back her father's shady schemes instead. Marty attempts to reassure Rachel, promising that once the casino deal is locked in, he'll return the blue cat to her. Their conversation grows tense, and Rachel suddenly kisses him to cut him off. That's when she reveals the truth. She's wearing a wire, and every word he says is being recorded. In a flash forward, Marty and Wendy sit for a casino interview. Wendy shines with optimism, but Marty looks distant. Days earlier, tension grows after learning Rachel is wired for the FBI. Wendy bans Charlotte from working at Blue Cat and warns Marty to stay away, but he insists Rachel should remain there to feed Roy false information. At the bar, Marty and Rachel fake casual talk while secretly texting. Rachel begs for protection from the cartel, but Marty admits he can't. He's barely trusted himself. Meanwhile, Cade drags Ruth into another scheme, promising quick cash if they steal an infrared camera from a boat. While scouting targets, Cade again pushes Ruth for Marty's hidden money, and she pretends she's still figuring it out. Marty's lawyer prepares him for a Kansas City Star lifestyle interview, but when Marty can't reach Wendy, he tracks her phone to a deserted field. Believing the Snells kidnapped her, he confronts Darlene, who denies it. In truth, Mason abducted Wendy, blaming her for losing Zeke. She pleads to call Marty, and Mason demands Zeke in exchange for her life. Marty convinces Wilkes to help and secures temporary custody through social services, bending rules to speed up the process. While captive, Wendy admits to Mason that the bones found on the Snell farm were Grace's, and Jacob covered it up. She later tries to escape, hitting Mason, but he restrains her again. She opens up about her troubled youth, revealing mistakes she regrets deeply. That night, Ruth and Cade botch their burglary attempt, and Ruth breaks down, confessing she may know where Marty stashes his money. Marty finally brings Zeke to Mason, but is forced into a deadly standoff. Wendy stabs Mason with a screwdriver, and Marty fatally shoots him. They cremate the body and foster Zeke, later using him to present a wholesome family image during their casino campaign. Rachel spirals again after Petty cuts her off from drugs, turning to heroin on her own. The cartel's product has been tampered with, as Darlene secretly laced it with fentanyl as payback for the burned poppy field. The mix causes a wave of overdoses across the region, and the deaths quickly trace back to local supply. During a DEA meeting, Petty pieces together that the outbreak can't be national, it must come from the Ozarks. At the same time, Helen's people reach the same conclusion. The DEA raids Amos's auto shop, a front for heroin distribution. Helen bails him out, but once back at the shop, he's tied up and tortured. After admitting to cutting the heroin with filler, he's killed with a plastic bag. Meanwhile, Ruth eyes Marty's hidden cash. She tricks the funeral home director into showing her the building's security system. Later, she pressures Marty to give her office space again, then uses the chance to swipe the funeral home keys. That night, she and Cade break in, searching caskets but coming up empty. Cade lashes out, calling Ruth useless and even striking her. Elsewhere, Wyatt is expelled for helping Jonah during a school fight, but Marty gets the decision reversed to protect Wyatt's college chances. Charlotte tries to impress Wyatt by stealing a rare book he admired, but he rejects it, pointing out how unfairly punishments fall on families like his compared to hers. Wendy secretly uses $1.8 million from Jonah's laundering setup to donate to Wilkes' charity, trapping him into continuing the casino project. At the same time, Marty receives a cruel video from Helen, Petty's own mother, using heroin provided by the cartel. He shows it to Petty, forcing him to drop Rachel's charges. Marty then funds her rehab in Miami, hiding the money in Buddy's mausoleum. Charlotte shocks her parents by announcing she wants emancipation. Soon after, Jacob and Darlene's car is ambushed by gunfire on a dark road. Charlotte pushes forward with her emancipation, hiring a lawyer to represent her. At the same time, Cade and Wyatt pull off a robbery at Lickety Splits. Ruth keeps their names out of it when the sheriff comes around, but she quietly tries to return the stolen cash. Wyatt later gets accepted to college, though he's unsure about going. Ruth, however, is determined to steer him toward a better life. Meanwhile, Jacob and Darlene survive an ambush, though Jacob is badly hurt. Later, Marty and Helen inform Jacob that the government can seize land for the casino using riparian rights in eminent domain. Jacob reluctantly agrees, but he secretly decides to kill Darlene to maintain peace. On a morning walk, he prepares to strike, but collapses. Darlene admits she poisoned his coffee, and as he dies, the two share one final moment of love. Wilkes then arranges a meeting with the Gaming Commission, where the chairman demands a non-union site in exchange for approval. Marty agrees, despite knowing this will upset Frank. The casino finally gets the green light, and Marty quietly begins planning his family's escape to Australia while leaving cartel business in Ruth's hands. Roy returns to Missouri to finish loose ends before heading back to Chicago. He goes fishing and gets into a heated argument with Cade, who ends up killing him and sinking his body. Meanwhile, Darlene fixates on baby Zeke. To send a message, she shaves Jonah's head, terrifying the Byrdes into handing the child over to her. Marty begins preparing Ruth for the family's planned departure. He shows her the inner workings of cartel operations and even reveals the location of $50 million hidden inside Buddy's mausoleum. Cade, however, knows the law is closing in after being spotted while hiding Roy's car. In desperation, he threatens to expose Ruth for killing Russ and Boyd unless she gives him money. Instead of caving, Ruth confesses to Wyatt herself. Heartbroken, Wyatt storms off, leaving her behind. At home, Marty finally admits his plan to Wendy. He wants to escape to Australia with the kids, leaving cartel business behind. He makes it clear his priority is saving their family. The next day, while Marty charters a plane, Helen visits Wendy. She praises Wendy's growing influence and tells her the cartel respects her role in pushing the casino forward. Things escalate when Charlotte goes to the Langmores looking for Wyatt. Cade corners her, demanding to know where the cartel money is, but Ruth steps in to protect her and takes her safely home. Learning how desperate Cade has become, Marty suggests paying him off to make him disappear. Wendy pretends to agree. She offers Cade $500,000, which he accepts before trying to flee, but the money is bait. Helen's associate intercepts and kills him. At the grand opening of the casino, Wendy reveals she scrapped the family's escape plan, convinced they're safer staying put. As tensions rise, Frank bombs Marty's office over union disputes, and Helen confirms Cade's death, making it clear Wendy outmaneuvered Marty's plan. Season 3. In Mexico, a man disguised as a delivery worker carries out a brutal attack. He stabs a store clerk, steals keys, kills him, then plants explosives that wipe out men counting cash and the money itself. As crowds rush to grab bills falling from the sky, another bomb explodes, leaving chaos behind. Back in Missouri, Wendy reviews a cheesy promo for the family's new casino while secretly keeping tabs on bloody cartel wars wars online. Charlotte has gone from fighting for emancipation to now serving as her parents' secretary. At the casino, Ruth clashes with Frank Cosgrove Jr. over drop locations, but Marty tells her to let it go. Marty is cautious about laundering again, despite Ruth's frustrations. Wendy courts convention clients, even promising a band to win them over, while Ruth deals with Frank's men showing up late to cash drops. At dinner, Jonah pitches a gold mining scheme, but Wendy urges him to get a normal job. Later, Wendy floats a bold idea, expanding Navarro's reach into legitimate businesses like casinos. Marty calls it insane, but she claims it came from Helen. Meanwhile, Helen is tortured by Navarro's men, tested for her loyalty. Darlene, still unhinged, slashes tires after a spat at a baby class. Wyatt, now squatting in a mansion, is arrested after being caught by the homeowners. Marty and Wendy try couples therapy, though it's revealed Marty secretly pays the therapist to take his side. Helen pressures Marty to resume laundering immediately, while Wendy pitches her expansion plan directly to Navarro, who listens but doesn't reveal his stance. The casino faces more drama as Ruth throws Frank Jr. out of a poker game, only for him to attack her outside. Ruth fights back, humiliating him in front of everyone, leaving Marty worried about the fallout. Meanwhile, Wendy sneaks into their old family home, wandering through it like she never left. A teacher loses control in his classroom after students are distracted by their phones. When one girl shows him upsetting news, he snaps, grabbing every phone, tossing them into a wood chipper, then beating the worker who questions him. Back in the Ozarks, Marty and Ruth meet with Frank Cosgrove Sr. after Ruth's fight with his son. Frank demands Ruth be fired, but Marty refuses, offering a bigger cut instead. Frank settles for 15% while making it clear tensions remain. Wendy pushes forward with plans to buy another casino, clashing with Marty, who warns it's reckless. Their fight deepens when Wendy reveals Helen is moving to the Ozarks. At a meeting with casino owners Carl and Anita, Wendy drives the pitch, but Carl resists. Marty plays on Carl's frustrations about always being sidelined by Anita, which stalls Wendy's efforts. Meanwhile, Helen battles personal issues when her ex uses an Amber Alert against her. She vents to Wendy while house hunting, hinting at cracks in her own marriage. Things get more complicated when Wendy's brother Ben arrives unexpectedly after losing his teaching job. Ruth suspects he's lying, but Wendy welcomes him. Marty, already distrustful, secretly bugs Wendy's phone and overhears her conversations with Helen and Navarro. The rival casino across the river becomes a target. Frank Jr. sabotages its fireworks, sparking a fire that derails Wendy's deal. Furious, Wendy and Ruth retaliate by rigging slot machines, cornering Carl and Anita into finally signing. Helen celebrates with Wendy but arranges for her ex to be beaten. Meanwhile, Federal Agent Evans drops a bombshell, an audit triggered by their second casino purchase. With forensic accountants set to monitor everything, Marty returns home with a warrant in hand, glaring at Wendy as their fragile empire comes under new pressure. Wendy dreams about killing Marty after dumping a dog's body, only to jolt awake, rattled. The next morning, Marty asks if she needs backup with the cartel, but she brushes him off, saying Helen will help. Their distance grows when he points out she shouted, "I can't," in her sleep. Helen later hints Wendy is overshadowing Marty, though Wendy denies it. At the casino, Carl and Anita confront them, furious over plans to shut things down. Wendy coolly asserts they'll win in the end, though Anita refuses to sell the hotel. Meanwhile, FBI agent Maya Miller arrives, heavily pregnant but sharp as ever, laying out her team's audit of every dollar coming in and out. Marty secretly asks Ruth to launder money through the new casino, despite Wendy insisting it stay clean. Their conversation gets interrupted by Ben, who's awkwardly trying to charm Ruth. Soon after, Ruth discovers Wendy has secretly shut the place down. Frustrations mount, with Marty, Wendy, and Frank Cosgrove all realizing they've been left out of the loop. Tensions spill into therapy, where Wendy calls Marty out for going behind her back. He explodes, blaming her for their problems, but their therapist sides with Wendy. Navarro pressures Wendy to secure the hotel by any means necessary, while Carl later kills Anita in a fit of rage, clearing Wendy's path to close the deal. Wendy provokes Darlene in public, taking a punch and a threat in the process. Agent Miller tempts Marty with the idea of flipping for the FBI, warning Evans will destroy him otherwise. At a concert, Marty shockingly agrees, only to be snatched by armed men in front of Ben and Ruth, who helplessly watch as he's thrown into an SUV. Marty is kidnapped and thrown onto a private plane headed for Mexico. Ben panics and tries calling the police, but Ruth stops him, warning him to talk to his sister instead. Wendy gets word about Marty's abduction and confronts Helen, who insists she had no part in it, though her actions raise doubts. In Mexico, Marty is locked in a small cell, dragged in front of Navarro and questioned. Navarro asks what he truly wants, leaving Marty rattled and without answers. Back home, Wendy struggles to keep Ben from digging too deep. She finally admits they work for a cartel, shocking him. Helen, sensing things spinning out of control, warns her this is a test from Navarro, and Marty's fate depends on how well they perform. Ruth worries she can't handle business without Marty, but keeps operations moving. FBI agent Maya Miller shows up at the casino, suspicious about Marty's sudden trip. She starts pressing Ruth for numbers, noticing inconsistencies. Meanwhile, Wendy tries to reassure her kids, but Charlotte and Jonah can tell she's lying about Marty being in Kansas City. Marty endures bright lights, loud music, and relentless pressure. Navarro keeps demanding to know his desires, insisting Wendy wants everything, while accusing Marty of fearing her. Marty eventually breaks down, admitting he doesn't trust his wife, fears Navarro, and has opposed their casino plans from the start. Navarro sees this honesty as progress. Amid flashbacks of his childhood, Marty is ordered to fix frozen accounts. He pulls it off quickly, screaming in frustration afterward. Finally, he tells Navarro he wants control over laundering, promising he can turn the FBI agent. He even demands thanks. In the end, Marty is unexpectedly released and dropped off at his home, walking the long driveway back to his family. Agent Maya Miller pushes to use Marty as an asset, while Agent Evans insists he needs to be taken down. Miller asks for more time. Meanwhile, Marty returns home oddly cheerful, cooking breakfast and insisting he's fine. Ruth is relieved when she hears from him, while Ben worries about the danger she's been dragged into. At the office, Marty meets with Wendy, Ruth, and Helen. Ruth apologizes for blaming herself, but he brushes it off and tells her to shut down Frank Jr.'s loan sharking. To boost cash flow, Wendy convinces Sam to lend them his inheritance. Navarro calls Wendy, asking her to purchase a horse ranch. When she questions why he let Marty return, Navarro tells her Marty passed his test because, like him, he wants to win. Ruth warns Frank Jr. to stop, while Marty tries to intimidate Agent Miller. Later, Marty and Wendy tour the ranch, making a deal with owner Ollie. At home, Charlotte grows suspicious when Aaron spends time with Frank's men, especially Tommy, who snoops around the Byrde house. Jonah confronts him, leading to tension. In court, Darlene fights for custody of baby Zeke. With Wyatt testifying in her favor, the judge rules against Wendy. Ruth ends up locked in a truck by Tommy, but Ben rescues her. Meanwhile, Darlene and Wyatt's unsettling relationship grows. Marty distracts himself with an old arcade game, hinting at his childhood memories. Wendy, however, focuses on controlling Agent Miller by digging into her past. Marty prefers a different approach, offering Miller dirt on corrupt businessman Roger Blinkhorn. She demands to know what happened in Mexico before she'll listen. Tensions explode when Navarro's men mutilate a rival's horse. Wendy lashes out, but Navarro reminds her she isn't a partner, she's property. The episode closes with Wendy shaken, ignored by Marty, and left standing alone as Helen coldly drives away. Marty and Wendy visit Sue the therapist, both admitting they've bribed her for support. Their argument explodes when Marty brings up Wendy ordering Cade's death. She insists it was for the family, but he calls her selfish and power-hungry. She fires back, calling him jealous and ungrateful before storming out, leaving Sue stunned that they revealed so much. Ruth clashes with Frank Jr. after he confronts her about his car, damaged by Ben's prank. Meanwhile, Wendy updates Helen about her fight with Marty. Their chat is interrupted when Darlene barges in, bragging about replanting her poppies. Helen warns her the cartel won't tolerate it, but Darlene doesn't back down. Marty considers working with Agent Maya, but refuses to sign her confession until she proves trustworthy. At the same time, Darlene pressures Sheriff Nix to use his deputies in her operation, forcing him to cut ties with the Byrdes. Charlotte, Jonah, and Aaron hang out at the lake with Tommy, who pulls out a gun during a drinking game. Jonah shows off his shooting skills, but things escalate until police arrive and arrest everyone. At the station, Wendy and Helen clash over Aaron's behavior. Wendy reveals Aaron admitted she wanted to lose her virginity, shocking Helen. Ruth and Ben grow closer, sharing drinks, and eventually becoming intimate. Charlotte comforts Jonah about girls, but both worry their dad might move out for good. Meanwhile, Wendy explores creating a foundation with Jim's help. Later, she discovers Ben flushed his bipolar meds, worrying he'll spiral. 3 confronts Ruth, convinced Wyatt is sleeping with Darlene. When Ruth confronts him, Wyatt admits he's happy now and blames her for ruining his life. Marty realizes he's being tailed, and Helen confirms it's not the cartel. That night, the Byrdes stay home together as tensions rise. Elsewhere, Ruth witnesses a drop turn violent when armed men kill Frank's crew and burn the money. Ruth is questioned by agents Evans and Miller about the shootout and her ties to Marty, with Helen present as her lawyer. They press her about Frank Jr. and her past, but she holds firm until she and Helen walk out. Ben waits for her outside and pushes the idea of running away, but she refuses. At home, Jonah shows Charlotte drone footage of the killings. She convinces him not to tell their parents to avoid more fights. Frank Sr. demands answers from Marty, furious his men are dead while Ruth walked away. Marty explains it's cartel business and urges him to stay calm. Meanwhile, Helen assures Wendy and Marty the rival cartel is gone, though Wendy doesn't buy it. Ben grows unstable, packing to leave, but Wendy tries to reason with him. Their fight escalates when he reveals Jonah witnessed the massacre. Marty is interrogated next, accused of killing an FBI informant. Afterward, Helen warns him to change phones and sweep the house for bugs. At the casino, Frank Jr. drunkenly confronts Ruth, accusing her of betrayal. Later, he brutally attacks her in the parking lot. She's rushed to the hospital, leaving Marty and Ben shaken. Marty blames the FBI for putting her in danger, while Wendy worries about controlling Ben. Darlene learns Wyatt resents Ruth for killing their family, but shifts his anger toward Marty, calling him a disease. Meanwhile, Sue's flashy spending draws Helen's suspicion. Soon after, cartel enforcer Nelson kills Sue and disposes of her records. When Ruth wakes, she demands Frank Jr. be killed, furious that Marty only cut ties with the mob. Wendy insists this is the best they can do, but Ruth feels betrayed. Later, Wyatt visits her and admits he wants to forgive her, but isn't ready yet. Ruth is heartbroken as Wyatt walks away. Marty visits Sue's house only to find her car gone and the place wiped clean. Realizing Helen had her killed, he carefully erases his tracks before leaving. Meanwhile, Wendy drops Charlotte and Jonah at community service and runs into Helen, leading to a tense exchange about their failing partnership. Marty pushes Agent Miller to investigate scammers with offshore accounts, but she refuses. At the casino, Ruth tries to return to work, though still shaken, while Ben grows reckless, storming Frank Jr.'s business and later getting drunk and violent at a bar. His outbursts land him in jail, forcing Wendy and Marty to deal with Helen's anger as she lists his growing charges. Ruth bails Ben out, but he rails against Wendy for not avenging her. He accuses her of going soft since marrying Marty, while Ruth reminds him she's more dangerous than he thinks. At home, Marty suggests committing Ben, but Wendy refuses, insisting it's her decision. Wendy slips evidence into Senator Wade's hands, who then delivers it to the FBI, angering Miller's boss. She's warned she'll be sent back to D.C. At the Byrdes charity gala, Darlene arrives with Wyatt just to spite Wendy. Jonah shares a kiss with Aaron, while Ben crashes the event and publicly unravels, shouting about their lies. He's arrested again and ordered to a state hospital, leaving Wendy devastated. During a visit, Ben blames Wendy for locking him up and begs Ruth to get him out. With Darlene's help, Sheriff Nix arranges his release. Free but unstable, Ben heads straight to Helen's home. In front of Aaron, he exposes her mother's cartel ties, shouting that she orders torture and killings. Helen furiously tries to contain the damage, calling him sick while Aaron watches in shock. Ben rides in the back of a cab, spiraling between laughter and tears, while Marty searches for him at Ruth's place. Ruth, furious over Marty having been committed, defends him. Soon after, Ben arrives and lashes out at Marty, admitting he told Helen's daughter the truth about her mother's cartel ties. Marty and Ruth panic, knowing this mistake could cost Ben his life. Wendy, unaware at first, grows alarmed when Helen shows up at her house. Meanwhile, Charlotte and Jonah find Aaron shaken after Ben revealed everything. Jonah blurts out parts of the truth, and Aaron storms off, furious with her mother. At the Byrde home, Helen demands answers, but Wendy tries to spin Ben's actions as delusions. Helen isn't convinced, warning that Ben won't stop talking. Ruth hides Ben at Darlene's farm, where Wyatt confesses he's in love with Darlene and teases Ruth about her own feelings for Ben. But Ben, restless, ignores warnings and shows up at the casino. Nelson is already there, waiting to kill him. Marty spots Ben on security cameras and races to get him out. Ben confesses his love to Ruth before following Marty onto a boat where Wendy meets them. Wendy takes her brother on the road, but his instability only grows. He calls Helen to apologize, forcing Wendy to intervene. Breaking down, she begs Marty for guidance, realizing she can't keep Ben safe. Ben dreams of a future with Ruth, but Wendy knows reality is closing in. At a restaurant, the siblings share one last peaceful meal. Wendy quietly leaves, heartbroken, while Ben lingers inside. Nelson arrives soon after. From the road, Wendy calls Marty in tears, torn over abandoning her brother. He begs her to come home. She pulls over, sobbing, as the tragedy closes in. Wendy is left broken after abandoning Ben, while Marty and Ruth face the grim task of cremating his body. Ruth demands answers, but only learns that Ben called Helen, sealing his fate. Marty pleads with her not to retaliate against Nelson. Wendy, drowning in guilt, distances herself until finally returning home, where Jonah confronts her, furious she won't avenge his uncle. Meanwhile, Navarro suffers a brutal attack during his son's baptism. Shaken, he tells Helen to move his children to America and quietly considers giving her control of the Byrdes operation. Sensing danger, Wendy insists Helen plans to kill them. To prove loyalty, Wendy calls Navarro, admitting she gave up her brother to protect his cartel. He respects her honesty, though Ruth later quits in rage, blaming Wendy for Ben's death. Ruth drifts toward Darlene, who offers her a place in her heroin business. Darlene also strikes back at Frank Jr., shooting him as payback for hurting Ruth, then brokers a partnership with his father. Ruth finally agrees to join her. Back at the casino, Sam is arrested for laundering, and Marty angrily calls out Agent Miller for refusing to act on his evidence. Helen, working her own angle, meets with political allies and the FBI, pushing to edge the Byrdes out. It becomes a battle of loyalty and leverage. Navarro summons both sides to Mexico. Before leaving, Helen taunts Jonah, revealing it was Wendy who betrayed Ben. The teen nearly shoots her but hesitates. At the same time, Marty scrambles when Maya learns Helen is cutting her own deal with the FBI. Finally, Marty, Wendy, and Helen arrive at Navarro's estate. As Navarro greets them, Helen is abruptly executed. Shocked and covered in blood, the Byrdes hear Navarro's chilling words. Welcome to New Beginnings. Season 4, The final season kicks off with chaos as the Byrdes minivan flips after nearly colliding with a semi. The timeline then jumps back to Mexico, where Marty and Wendy meet cartel boss Omar Navarro. His lawyer Helen has just been executed, and now Omar introduces his hot-headed nephew Javi. Navarro warns the couple that if Javi senses weakness, he might even try to kill his own uncle. Omar then drops a bombshell. He wants the FBI to clear him so he can retire and freely travel to the US. Wendy insists it's impossible, but Navarro isn't convinced. Back in Missouri, Ruth has teamed up with Darlene and Wyatt, even buying the Lazy O motel as a laundering front. But Darlene quickly sets the terms, leaving Ruth frustrated. Meanwhile, private investigator Mel Saddam turns up, hired to track down Helen for divorce papers, unaware she's dead. Jonah, still furious over Ben's death, gives Ruth his uncle's ashes and later offers to help launder money with his own software. The Byrdes return home to find Jonah shot out their windows in anger. Tensions rise when he openly blames Wendy for Ben's death. At the casino, Marty and Wendy confront Darlene, only to be stunned when Ruth shows up as her new partner. Ruth struggles with doubt, but Wyatt lifts her spirits, reminding her she can handle anything. Mel grows suspicious after sneaking into Helen's house and reviewing security footage. He confronts the Byrdes, showing proof Jonah once aimed a gun at Helen. Jonah brushes it off and slips away to Ruth, officially agreeing to launder money for her operation. Things take a darker turn when Javi kills Sheriff Nix and forces the Byrdes to dispose of the body in their crematorium. Jonah arrives home just as his parents are helping move the corpse. Ruth buys a strange, goat-shaped cookie jar and places Ben's ashes inside, giving herself a piece of closure. Meanwhile, Marty visits Agent Maya Miller, asking how deals work for cooperating witnesses. She assumes he's talking about himself, but he shocks her by revealing Navarro wants immunity and freedom. Maya calls it impossible, but Marty pushes her to consider it. Back home, Wendy discovers Ben's ashes are missing and confronts Ruth, who refuses to hand them over. Their heated argument ends with Ruth firing back that Wendy only sees Ben as a weakness because she had him killed. Navarro grows frustrated with Javi's reckless behavior and slaps him, warning that his impatience could bring down the entire cartel. At the same time, Darlene loses her deal with Frank Cosgrove after the mob pulls out, fearing cartel heat. Ruth and Jonah brainstorm laundering ideas for the Lazy O motel, while Jonah continues drifting further from his parents. He openly tells them he's working with Ruth, leaving Wendy furious. Wendy also pushes her own agenda, summoning attorney Jim to discuss taking over political influence across the Midwest. He tells her she'll need $150 million in powerful board members. Wendy then targets pharmaceutical CEO Claire Shaw, first failing to win her over, but later sealing a deal by offering cheaper opium from Navarro's farm in exchange for a huge donation. Ruth tries to recruit celebrity chef Carrie Stone to promote their heroin, and after testing it himself, he shows interest but unnerves Darlene with his curiosity. Meanwhile, Javi forces Marty to clean up his mess at Helen's house while secretly listening to a cartel deal with Navarro. The Byrdes host dinner with Maya, but tension rises when Jonah challenges his parents about burning bodies. Maya reluctantly meets Navarro alone as Wendy threatens her into going. Wendy is digging in the yard while Agent Maya Miller is escorted to meet cartel boss Omar Navarro. On his private jet, Navarro tries to charm her, but she keeps things professional. Maya lays out what it would take for him to earn freedom: prison time, giving up his operation, and surrendering product. She leaves unimpressed. Later, she warns Marty she wants nothing to do with him until Navarro makes a real offer. Navarro demands Marty get pharmaceutical CEO Claire Shaw a sample. Meanwhile, Wendy builds a shrine for her late brother Ben, but Jonah mocks it, causing a blow-up. Wendy cuts the power to Jonah's basement setup to stop him from laundering with Ruth. Ruth arrives to help Jonah move his equipment, sparking a furious fight. Wendy blames Ruth for Ben's death, and Ruth fires back while Jonah sides with her. At the Lazy O, Jonah shows Ruth his laundering program. Wyatt later warns Ruth about angering Darlene, who confronts her but softens after Ruth delivers cash. Still, Darlene reminds her who's really in charge. In Chicago, Wendy pushes political connections with attorney Jim and Senator Schaefer, while Navarro pressures Marty about Maya. Javi tags along, pushing himself into Claire Shaw's deal and irritating both Marty and Wendy. Claire is visibly uneasy about working with the cartel. Ruth tries expanding her operation by bringing in chef Carrie Stone, who samples product at her place. Jonah joins the gathering until Darlene storms in, angry. Though she calms once money changes hands, Marty convinces Navarro to tip Maya off about a gun shipment, which shocks her but proves Marty's loyalty. Over dinner, Javi makes the Byrdes uncomfortable with his behavior around Charlotte, but the night is cut short when he gets troubling news about the shipment. Wendy kicks things off, giving a heartfelt speech about the Byrde Foundation and its partnership with Shaw Medical, once again using Ben's struggles to win sympathy. Listening nearby is private investigator Mel Saddam, who isn't buying her act. At school drop-off, Charlotte tells Jonah she'll be helping Wendy, though he reminds her not to ditch SAT prep. rep. Meanwhile, Ruth struggles to manage the Lazy O motel, dealing with theft and too much cash to clean. She decides to hire Sam Dermody, the gullible gambling addict the Byrdes once roped into shady schemes. Marty travels with Javi, who's furious the FBI seized another shipment. He presses Marty for Agent Maya Miller's number, but Marty refuses. Later, they deliver opium to Claire Shaw's contact, while Wendy seals the business side of the deal. Javi continues making Marty uneasy with his reckless behavior. Back home, Ruth joins Chef Carrie Stone at the casino, where he overdoses after heavy partying. Ruth saves him with naloxone, but Wendy scolds her for endangering their business. Forced to explain everything to Darlene, Ruth watches as Carrie's driver tries to blackmail them, only for Darlene to shoot him without hesitation, leaving Ruth and Wyatt to bury the body. Sheriff Guerrero questions Ruth about her night with Carrie and then turns her attention to the Byrdes, who cleverly shift suspicion back toward Ruth and her ties to Darlene. Marty warns Wendy this puts Jonah at risk, but Wendy coldly suggests maybe that's for the best. Javi suspects a mole and halts deliveries, throwing Claire into a panic. Wendy tries to pressure Navarro into stepping in, but he refuses. At the end, Marty visits Ruth to apologize and surprises her with an offer. He'll buy all her product, leaving Ruth stunned. Private investigator Mel Saddam sneaks drugs out of an evidence locker before getting caught by another officer. Meanwhile, Charlotte ditches her SATs, ripping up her test and walking out. At the casino, Wendy reassures business partner Claire Shaw that Ruth will step in to supply heroin since Javi refuses to make opium deliveries. Ruth arrives with the product, but later discovers Darlene sold the entire supply to Frank Jr., cutting Ruth out of the deal. This sets off a scramble to recover the drugs before Claire's patience runs out. Elsewhere, Wendy and attorney Jim meet Senator Schaefer, who needs help cleaning up a federal fraud case involving his son and grandson. In return, Schaefer hints at joining their foundation's board. Wendy agrees, but later asks Jim to dig up dirt on Mel after learning the PI is sniffing around her family. At home, tension rises when missing posters of Wendy's brother Ben appear around town. Marty privately asks Charlotte to convince Wyatt to push Darlene into taking them down. Wendy later turns the tables by officially filing a missing person report, staging a tearful scene for the sheriff while slyly letting Darlene know. Marty and Ruth try to retrieve the heroin from Frank Jr.'s buyers. The first exchange goes smoothly, but the second turns tense as Ruth faces off with a paranoid dealer. She eventually walks out with the drugs, while Marty holds back Claire's trigger-happy associate. Meanwhile, Jonah continues helping Darlene launder money, which frustrates both his parents. Mel keeps digging, questioning Ruth about Ben. Darlene confronts Wendy at her home, trying to show dominance. Instead, she suddenly collapses from a heart attack. Wendy coldly kneels beside her, watching as she struggles on the floor. Maya Miller and her FBI team try to stop a cartel truck, but the driver flees before it detonates, leaving agents badly hurt. Maya blames Navarro, but Marty insists he needs the deal too much to risk it. At the hospital, Darlene recovers from her heart attack with Wyatt by her side, but she fumes when she learns Ruth went behind her back. Later, Ruth urges Wyatt to leave with her, but he clings to Darlene and baby Zeke. Wendy works her own angles, bringing lawyer Jim deeper into the fold by confessing the family launders money for Navarro. She wants him to draft a deal with the FBI, but he's reluctant. Marty meets with Maya's bosses, who demand proof Navarro wasn't behind the bombing. Navarro then shocks everyone by handing control to his reckless nephew Javi, telling Marty the FBI can have it all, including him. Wendy continues her Cold War with Darlene, threatening to take everything she has. Meanwhile, Javi asserts himself, showing up at the casino and even at Jim's house, declaring himself the new boss. Frank Cosgrove Sr. storms into Darlene's house demanding repayment, but she shoots him dead. Wyatt finds the body and, shaken, considers Ruth's offer to leave. But when social services threaten to take Zeke, he proposes to Darlene instead. Wendy sets up Jonah by secretly accessing his accounts, causing him to panic until Marty fixes it. Jonah eventually learns it was his mother who sabotaged him and explodes with rage, accusing her of nearly getting him jailed. Marty sides with him, furious at Wendy for crossing the line. As the family fights, a call comes in. They have 12 hours to deliver Navarro, but the chaos deepens when Charlotte reveals Jonah is gone. In a flashback, Marty once lived a quiet life, very different from now. Ruth packs up to leave town, but Wyatt confesses he's staying. He plans to marry Darlene so baby Zeke won't end up in foster care. Ruth begs him not to, warning Darlene is dangerous, but Wyatt insists he loves her. Meanwhile, Navarro, Marty, Wendy, and lawyer Jim meet the FBI, expecting a deal. Instead, the Bureau forces Navarro to remain cartel boss for 5 more years. Maya is furious at the corruption, while Navarro rages, smashing his hand. Still, he accepts. Later, Claire gives Javi Ruth's description, putting her in danger. At home, Charlotte learns about the deal. Ruth tries to stop Frank Jr. from avenging his father's death, paying him off to walk away. But everything shifts when Maya goes rogue, leading a surprise arrest of Navarro at the airport. The Byrdes panic, knowing Javi will blame them. He ambushes Marty at Jim's house, but spares him after a call. Wendy tries convincing Navarro to cooperate, while Javi later agrees to his own FBI deal. Wyatt goes through with marrying Darlene, but tragedy strikes when Javi shows up at their home. home. After warning Darlene about the heroin, he shoots her and Wyatt dead. Ruth arrives to find Zeke crying, realizes what happened, and completely breaks down. Consumed by rage, she storms to the Byrdes' house with a shotgun. She demands the killer's name, threatening Marty's life. Jonah finally blurts it out, Javi. The Byrdes beg her not to act, but Ruth screams she'll stop at nothing for revenge. Ruth drives off, gun in hand, grief pouring out as Zeke cries in the back seat. Ruth, still shattered by Wyatt's murder, drives while replaying memories of their childhood dreams. Overcome, she pulls over, lost in grief. Meanwhile, Marty takes a call from Javi, who demands he clean up the bodies at Darlene's and says he's meeting Claire to renegotiate their deal. Wendy quickly questions why Marty didn't warn Javi about Ruth, but he refuses to put her life at risk. Tension rises as Jonah sides against Wendy, asking Charlotte to drive him back to his motel. Later, Ruth meets Jonah and Charlotte at the motel, asking where Javi stays. Jonah tries to stay quiet, but Charlotte eventually reveals their parents are meeting him in Chicago. Jonah even gives Ruth a photo of Javi and money for her trip. Before leaving, Ruth faces Wendy, who lies that Javi is flying back to Mexico for months. Ruth pretends to believe her, though she already knows the truth. She then visits Frank Jr., asking for a gun, before heading to Chicago. Along the way, she daydreams about shooting Javi on the street, but snaps back when Marty calls, warning the sheriff is looking for her. She brushes him off and continues on. In Chicago, Ruth spots Javi near the Shaw building but hesitates. She later spies on Marty, Wendy, and Claire dining with him, seething at their business-as-usual lives. Interrupting dinner, she forces them back to Claire's office at gunpoint, calling Wendy soulless and exposing their crimes. Marty pleads with her to stop, reminding her he once trusted her with his kids, but Ruth has reached her breaking point. Wendy lures Javi to the office under false pretenses. When he arrives, Ruth doesn't hesitate. She shoots him dead. Locking eyes with the Byrdes, she leaves as they prepare to clean up. Alone in her truck, Ruth sobs before composing herself and driving away. Wendy and Marty drink in their hotel room, rattled after Javi's death. Wendy instantly blames Marty, while he admits he thought he could talk Ruth out of pulling the trigger. Their argument spirals, with Marty breaking down and Wendy coldly reminding him this was his idea of a life. Marty pushes back, pointing out she was just as eager to dive in. Meanwhile, Ruth returns home where her cousin 3 asks if she killed Javi. She quietly confirms it. Back in Chicago, Wendy is turned away from Claire's office, while private investigator Mel delivers grim news to Helen's ex-husband and daughter, Aaron. Mel insists Helen was cartel connected, but Aaron urges her dad to stop digging before they get hurt. At home, Wendy wrongly blames Jonah for telling Ruth about Javi, only to realize it was Charlotte. The fight is interrupted by the FBI, who press them about Javi's disappearance. Agent Clay offers witness protection if they testify against Navarro, but Wendy rejects it, pushing instead to get Navarro extradited to Mexico. Clay isn't convinced, but Marty recognizes Wendy's angle, make Navarro look like he's still in charge. Ruth dumps the gun she used and lies to Sheriff Guerrero about where she's been. Marty later tries to cut a deal with Maya, but she brushes him off. Wendy then meets Navarro in prison, telling him Javi's gone and pitching her plan to restore his power. He threatens her family, but she holds her ground. Wendy's father Nathan arrives with church friends, claiming he's searching for Ben. His presence unsettles everyone, especially Charlotte, who bonds with him. As Wyatt's funeral comes, tensions deepen. Meanwhile, Navarro agrees Marty should travel to Mexico to act on his behalf. Ruth, refusing to be pushed, starts her own heroin supply deal with Claire. In a flashback, Wendy arranges the death of her brother Ben. Left alone in a diner, he's picked up by Nelson, who drives him out and kills him despite Ben begging for forgiveness and leaving a final message for Wendy. In the present, Marty heads to Mexico, tasked by Navarro to prove himself as more than a messenger. He meets the cartel leaders, including Navarro's sister Camila, and delivers the news that Javi is dead. He explains Javi was working with the government and betrayed them, and insists Navarro is still in charge despite being behind bars. Marty boldly promises to get him released. Wendy gets pushed back at home. Charlotte keeps her distance, while Ruth refuses Wendy's offer to partner on her deal with Claire. Frustrated, Wendy tips off the sheriff's office, but there's a new acting sheriff, Wyckoff, who begins digging into Ruth's operations. He questions Sam, then Jonah, until Wendy's father, Nathan, steps in and shuts it down. Wendy turns to Jim, the political insider who once cut ties, and pressures him to help her rally donations for her foundation. Meanwhile, private investigator Mel keeps digging into Ben's disappearance and pushes a witness to hand over surveillance footage. Ruth, realizing she's being watched, calls out the sheriff and later teams up with Frank Jr. to move product under the cops' noses. She outsmarts them by loading a U-Haul with decoys while Frank's crew moves the real stash. Back in Mexico, Marty uncovers a financial leak and has Navarro's man Cabrera tortured. Around the same time, Navarro is stabbed in prison but manages to survive, though he's left in a coma. Marty hides the truth from Camila while Cabrera eventually confesses under torture and is executed. Marty is settling into his role in Mexico, even picking up Navarro's habits like playing fetch with the dog after overseeing a cleanup. He meets Javi's lawyer about shipments in Chicago, and then deals with Camila, who wants to visit her brother. Marty dodges, not telling her Navarro is in a coma. Back home, Wendy scrambles after losing Shaw Medical's funding. Senator Schaefer lashes out at her, warning political deals are falling apart and that lawyers in Mexico are pushing to keep Navarro blacklisted. At the same time, Ruth boards a plane for the first time and surprises Rachel, the former Blue Cat Lodge owner, with a business pitch. Marty reunites with his family, where Charlotte says Ruth wants a meeting. When Wendy explains the new roadblock with Navarro, Marty realizes Camila is behind it and that he mistakenly had the wrong man killed. Wendy comforts him by insisting he only acted as Navarro would. At the motel, Marty visits Jonah, who's living with Nathan. Though distant, father and son admit they miss each other. Meanwhile, Ruth introduces Rachel to the casino plan. Wendy mocks the idea, pointing out Ruth's record, but Ruth reveals Rachel would hold the license. Wendy dismisses it, framing Ruth's offer as revenge for Wyatt and Ben. Despite Wendy's resistance, Marty thinks Ruth's deal makes sense. Wendy pushes her own plan, using Claire and Shaw Medical, while also pulling Camila closer. Soon, Camila joins Wendy in Chicago, forcing Claire to honor Javi's deal. Ruth and Rachel then learn Ruth legally inherited Wyatt's stake in the casino, giving her leverage. Tensions rise at home as Nathan and Mel press Wendy about Ben. Marty vents to Charlotte about Wendy's control, while Mel digs deeper with Maya's help. In a shocking move, Wendy suggests Camila replace Marty in Mexico. On the way home, Marty snaps in traffic and brutally beats a stranger. Charlotte picks Jonah up after Marty's violent outburst on the road, and the two bail out their parents from jail. Back home, Wendy tries to calm the tension, convinced that with Camila close, they can manage her. Marty worries about slipping intel to the FBI now that Camila has control, but Wendy reminds him he managed when Javi was in charge. She even softens, admitting she's difficult to love but promising freedom is near. Meanwhile, private investigator Mel tells Nathan he suspects Ben was targeted by a cartel hitman. Nathan refuses to believe Ben was involved in crime, but grows certain Wendy is responsible. He considers legal action after hearing the Byrdes were investigated for laundering. Ruth and Rachel take Jonah's advice and meet Charles Wilkes, who's eager to help just to spite Wendy. He offers to sell his casino stake and even finds a way to clean Ruth's record if she donates to a judge's causes. Ruth agrees to play along. At the Lazy O, Nathan tells his grandkids he wants them to live with him for safety. Later, he shocks Wendy by serving custody papers. When confronted, Charlotte admits she and Jonah told Nathan they'd go with him. Wendy panics, insisting she won't let her father take them. She and Marty agree they must stop Mel from testifying in court. Ruth meets Judge Mayhew and insists she's left crime behind while the judge prepares to review her case. Marty and Wendy, meanwhile, bribe their way to get Mel reinstated as a detective. Mel knows exactly why and debates whether to turn against them, with Maya warning him he'll regret staying quiet. In court, Mel never shows, but the judge questions the Byrdes' arrest and their unstable home. Jonah and Charlotte side with Nathan, devastating Wendy. In desperation, she drops to her knees, begging her father not to take them, but Nathan refuses. Shaken, Wendy slams her head against the car window. Ruth oversees the start of her property renovations while crews tear down old trailers. Elsewhere, Wendy, still bruised from hitting her own head, tries to admit herself into a mental health facility. When paperwork slows her down, she attempts bribery and threats, only to be handed a list of outside therapists instead. At the casino, Marty is stunned to see Ruth and Rachel in charge. Ruth reveals she inherited Darlene's estate and bought Wilkes' shares, and now the license is in her name. She proudly explains her record has been cleared, but refuses to launder cartel money. Marty warns of Navarro's wrath, but she won't budge. He updates Wendy, who's unraveling from stress and skipping their meeting with Navarro. Marty faces Navarro and Camila alone. Navarro wants the books perfect as he waits to be removed from the SDN list. Meanwhile, Wendy bribes her father Nathan with $2 million to leave the kids alone, but he refuses and vows to keep them. She threatens his life before storming off. Marty pleads with Ruth to reconsider, but she stands firm, leaving him desperate. Later, Wendy pushes Marty to bring the kids back home. When he tries, Charlotte questions if he'd ever truly stay with Wendy once this is all over. Marty stays silent. Tensions boil further when Rachel clashes with Wendy at a fundraiser, calling her heartless. That night, Marty and Wendy's attempts to launder through the casino are blocked by Ruth, prompting Wendy to secretly send Nelson to threaten Rachel. Rachel later confronts Marty, realizing Wendy is behind it. Wendy's spiral deepens as she admits herself into a facility, using it as leverage to manipulate her kids. Meanwhile, Ruth confesses to Deputy Wyckoff that Javi killed Wyatt and Sheriff Nix, then admits she killed Javi. Soon after, Nelson comes after her, but Rachel kills him in a dramatic standoff. Ruth covers up Nelson's body in the unfinished pool when Marty arrives with a chilling ultimatum. Help him bring the kids back, or he'll tell Camila she killed Javi. Ruth is stunned he'd threaten her, but Marty insists it's his idea, not Wendy's. He claims the kids trust her more and blames her for Jonah leaving. Later, Marty meets with Camila, who presses him for answers about Javi's death. He sticks to a vague story, while also hinting Navarro could be taken out during his FBI transfer. Camila doesn't commit, but listens carefully. Meanwhile, Ruth visits Wendy at the treatment facility and realizes Marty, not Wendy, issued the threat. Their conversation briefly turns vulnerable, with both acknowledging their father's cruelty. Ruth soon makes her move. Armed with a gun, she confronts Nathan while he drinks. After pushing him about his true intentions with Jonah and Charlotte, Nathan admits he only fought for custody to hurt Wendy, whom he calls an embarrassment. Ruth forces him to tell the kids they're not going with him. The plan works. Charlotte and Jonah return to Wendy, though they remain distant. The Byrdes finally experience the car crash from the season's opening, but all survive. Navarro's priest warns them it may have been a message. Marty confronts Ruth again about Nelson, and she later agrees with Rachel to work with the FBI in exchange for immunity. At the gala, Wendy cements her power while Camila discovers from Claire that Ruth killed Javi. She warns the Byrdes not to interfere. That night, Camila ambushes Ruth at her house. Ruth defiantly tells her Javi was a murderous man and she's not sorry. Camila shoots her. The series closes with P.I. Mel confronting the Byrdes, holding Ben's ashes. Jonah raises a shotgun, then a gunshot rings out as the screen fades to black, and just like that, bodies buried, secrets covered, and somehow the ones who caused the most chaos walk away on top. It's messy, it's dark, and it's kind of hilarious how much concrete got wasted in the process, but hey, at least nobody tried laundering money through a lemonade stand. Yet, see you in the next recap.